Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Anna Stansfield. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we take a look back at stories from our sustainability team, from relocating burrowing owls to creating cool corridors in Phoenix.
Arizona's climate and terrain provides the perfect home for burrowing owls, the only owls that nest and live underground. But the ground these owls make home has become increasingly valuable. And as Raven Payne tells us, that makes for a hot housing market for these raptors.
It's not a what or a where, but rather a who. Burrowing owls are the cute little raptors you've probably seen or heard flying around Arizona. But because so many humans want to live in Arizona, these little guys are being crowded out.
Every day, there is some construction for new houses or a shopping center or a warehouse somewhere in Phoenix or Pinal County or greater Maricopa County.
Wild at Heart is a rescue center for birds of prey. According to founder and executive director Bob Fox, over the years, they've built thousands of homes for burrowing owls. These artificial burrows require certain criteria.
We look for open space, number one. You don't want to have a lot of tree lines because those will hide predators. You want to make sure that the owls have a good visual area to look. Again, it's all about predator awareness. So primarily what we're looking at now is still what little agricultural areas are left.
Moving an owl is a three-step process: intake, temporary habitat, and then releasing them to their artificial burrow. The explosive growth in Arizona means more owls are losing their homes, so they have to get them in and out of their temporary homes even faster. Burrowing owls like these usually have a minimum of 60 days before being released from this habitat, but now that number has changed to less than 30. Early one recent Saturday, more than 24 volunteers came out to build a neighborhood of sorts for owls. After they moved 2 owls into each home, they plan to come back every week to feed them. It's hard work, but the cute factor is good motivation.
I do a lot of road biking, and when I road bike the streets and stuff like that, it's just so neat to go near, canals or agricultural areas, and you see them flying around, and they're just so cute.
And who wouldn't want one of these guys as their neighbors? In Santan Valley, Raven Payne, Cronkite News.
Although these animals are currently losing their habitats, Bob Fox says he does not want them on the endangered animals list, as that would cause more problems for them.
A vote that would double the size of the Coolidge generating plant was rejected earlier today. The Salt River project planned to expand the plant near one small community. Cronkite News reporter Faith Abercrombie heard from the people in Randolph and their concerns about toxic energy.
Environmental justice.
A cry for help.
Arizona Corporation Commission, vote no for the expansion.
To the Arizona Corporation Commission to reject SRP's latest proposal to install 16 gas turbines to create more electricity, but would impact the town of Randolph.
We all know that this is a health hazard. We are asking the commission to remember that first and foremost, we are human beings.
We want it now!
Residents from the Randolph community raised concerns at a press conference held before the ACC made their decision.
Many residents have been forced from their homes because of dangerous air pollution, leaving their homes for days to avoid vapors, odors, particulates, bright lights, and noise.
After a vote of 4-1, SRP will not add more gas turbines to the already existing 12 turbines at the plant.
The world needs to know that human rights violations have occurred and been occurring in Randolph for decades, unbeknown to the general public. This has affected us tremendously, or else we would not be here today.
In Phoenix, Faith Abercrombie, Cronkite News.
The Arizona Corporation Commission recommended that SRP comes up with another way to meet the demands of their customers that is less costly and without the effects to surrounding communities.
More than 250 trees were planted in Cesar Chavez Park this past weekend, establishing the first cool corridor for the city of Phoenix. Mackenzie Allen Sharmley is at the park to tell us the impact of tree equity.
This tree behind me is one of 259 that were planted by over 100 volunteers in an effort to ensure safer and more comfortable walkways for residents in the South Phoenix area. One tool the city has to combat increasing heat is the ability to plant more trees where shade is needed. 1 year ago, Phoenix became the first U.S. city to pledge to tree equity, an initiative ensuring all neighborhoods get the benefits that trees provide. This past weekend was the first move to plant what they call a cool corridor.
It is a corridor where students are walking to and from, so the students in years from today, 5-10 years, will have a nice shaded area to walk in. It brings the community together, partners together, and we're really trying to address this issue of tree equity in Phoenix. And I think this was a really wonderful way to do that, and it's our first step, and we're excited to keep planting.
The city has a goal of 100 cool corridors by 2030 and are prioritizing communities that are susceptible to heat vulnerability and are low income. In Cesar Chavez Park in Phoenix, Mackenzie Ellen Charmley, Cronkite News.
One of the most iconic plants in Arizona, the saguaro cacti, is encountering some dangers in our Sonoran desert. Luke Vickery tells us about one specific threat.
Bufflegrass, an invasive plant, is overtaking the habitat of our beloved saguaro cacti. While there are efforts to get rid of it, it may be impossible to eradicate. The saguaro cactus is a symbol for Arizona, but invasive plant species are getting in the way of a plant that usually thrives in the Arizona desert. Saguaro National Park's restoration ecologist Perry Grissom says the biggest threat comes from one plant, bufflegrass.
It's out there, it's just taking the water away from the saguaros, so they're not going to survive long term.
Bufflegrass was brought to arid portions of the U.S. beginning in the 1930s for cattle forage and erosion control. The plant thrives because of its drought tolerance and high seed production. Little thought was put into how it would affect Arizona's native plants.
Kind of colonize these areas between trees and shrubs and cacti in the desert, where those areas are typically barren. Now they're being, colonized by bunch grasses, and so it's filling in the space between our saguaros and trees and shrubs.
The record-setting monsoon rainfall last year and predictions of another wet monsoon season means things could get worse for our saguaros.
Last year we had a really tremendous monsoon. We got a lot of rain, like double. And the natives did really well, but bufflegrass did much, much better than they did. It's just like a really strong competitor.
Once we exit monsoon season, the saguaro will struggle to compete with the new, stronger, and more stable bufflegrass. But there's another aspect of bufflegrass that challenges the saguaro. Here in Saguaro National Park, bufflegrass not only competes for the same resources as saguaro cacti, but it can also start wildfires, which can be detrimental to a saguaro cactus.
It might take 200 years for saguaros to blink out on some hillside, but with a fire, they could be gone, overnight, basically.
The national park has plans in place to help mitigate the growth of bufflegrass, but the timing of the treatment is tricky.
Post-summer and early fall, where some treatments have been conducted because there was an opportunity to treat the bufflegrass because it had greened up and was actively growing. And so when you apply herbicide, when it's green and actively growing, that's when the herbicide is most effective.
The latest report out today by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change finds in one scenario that it is possible to limit climate change by 2030 by cutting greenhouse gas emissions nearly in half. Cronkite News reporter Autria Maneshny joins us now with more on what this means.
This report finds that the average annual global greenhouse gas emissions hit their highest levels in human history between 2010 and 2019. That rate is slowing down, but not fast enough. The IPCC warns that if emissions aren't drastically cut by 2030, limiting global warming to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit will be beyond reach. This means an increase in extreme conditions, including floods, wildfires, and droughts. However, climate expert Diana Urgeforsat said today during a presentation that it is possible to slow down the effects of climate change. One way is to transition the energy sector.
This will involve a substantial reduction in fossil fuel use, low or no carbon energy systems, widespread electrification, use of alternative fuels such as hydrogen and sustainable biofuels, use of carbon capture and storage, and improved energy efficiency.
That's slowly starting to happen around the globe, including here in Arizona. The state has the 7th highest number of registered electric vehicles, and Arizona is incentivizing solar installations through state tax credits. In the newsroom, Atria Mineshny, Cronkite News.
In a short press conference at the state capitol, Governor Doug Ducey and the wildland fire crew talked about the devastating effects of wildfires and what he is planning on to help with those affected. According to the Department of Forestry and Fire Management, in 2021, there were 123 wildfires in Arizona, which burned over 3,000 acres. Governor Ducey noted that an increase in high temperatures and dry vegetation is a fuel for the fires. He also says that he is working with local and state authorities to reduce the wildfires, flooding, and fire risk.
This year, we are going to double down on the Healthy Forest Initiative. Our budget proposes an additional $36 million to fund Phase 2 of our program, bringing the state's total investment for forest treatment to more than $42 million for this fiscal year.
Governor Ducey also stated that he is proud of the men and women who risk their lives due to the Arizona's wildfires year-round. Governor Ducey and local authorities also remind Arizona residents to be vigilant and protect their communities to reduce the number of wildfires. In the newsroom, Valeria Rodriguez, Cronkite News.
According to the USDA, honeybees are responsible for 1 out of every 3 bites of food we take, but they are currently facing dire threats. This year, over 1,000 beehives have been reported missing or vandalized in California. Karen Marroquin traveled to California's farming communities to explain what's happening to the bees and what's at stake.
Here in Fresno County, bees are essential for the growth of a lot of the country's produce, including plums here at 559 Honey Company. But in February of this year, Ben Zentner, a beekeeper in Kingsburg, received a pivotal call from a local farmer.
He told me that I had a beehive knocked over, so came out, took a look at it. Ended up seeing that all 4 hives were knocked over and that it was done maliciously, and ended up having 2 of the hives basically die off because of damage, plus I've got damage on equipment.
The vandalization cost Zentner nearly $700, but this isn't the first time that something like this has happened to him, and he's not alone. Rowdy Freeman, Butte County Sheriff's deputy and beekeeper, says that so far in California this year, 1,169 beehives have been reported vandalized or stolen.
It's the perfect crime, you know, it's one beekeeper stealing from another, and it's very difficult for beekeepers or even the general public to be able to differentiate between whether or not it's the legitimate beekeeper or it's a theft in progress.
This is similar to what happened in Zentner's situation.
The other individual was short on a contract and decided that they were going to get easy money and basically steal whole entire semi-load worth of bees.
Bees are extremely important to the agricultural community because without these, farmers and beekeepers wouldn't be able to grow food such as almonds or plums. Over 1/3 of the country's vegetables and 2/3 of the country's fruits and nuts are grown in California, according to state agriculture officials. Many of the crops here depend on bees to pollinate plants and trees to produce food. So honeybees are vital workers here and are often transported from farm to farm to do their job. However, the availability of cropland has been declining, while beehive rental costs are on the rise.
This year, the average price for a beehive was probably between $210 and $225 per hive. Some farmers need a couple hundred. Some farmers need a couple thousand.
Freeman says that's making it easy for thieves to make a lot of money with little effort. Luckily for Zentner, the thieves didn't get away with the crime thanks to GPS trackers that he installed in his beehives, which spared him a huge financial loss.
Of all the hives that were there, I'm going to guess it would have been over $100,000.
And it didn't take much to protect his bees.
The individual devices themselves are somewhere in the $150 range normally, and then you pay for those activation services, like a monthly fee on those devices. It's kind of a small price to pay to help protect your property and your bees.
Still, Zettner says that beehive thefts and vandalizations are far from gone.
It'll slow it down some, but it won't stop all of it because we can't have a GPS and everything. But, I mean, we can do what we can only do.
In Kingsburg, California, Karen Marroquin, Cronkite News.
Law enforcement officials say it's very difficult to investigate these types of crimes because they usually happen in rural areas, but they'll keep working hard to fight against the theft and vandalism. $1.2 trillion in health benefits. That's how much a nationwide transition to electric vehicles and zero-emission electricity by 2050 would generate. That's according to the American Lung Association's newest report released today. Cronkite News' Autria Maneshny tells us how this transition could benefit the state.
According to the American Lung Association, Phoenix ranks 5th for unhealthy ozone conditions. But the good news is the report says that a transition to electric vehicles can help avoid deaths and asthma attacks and also bring significant benefits to lower-income communities.
The Zeroing in Unhealthy Air report ranks Phoenix and Mesa, 21 out of 25 U.S. metropolitan areas, that would benefit the most from a transition to electric vehicles, particularly when it comes to public health.
In Arizona, this would mean $15.1 billion in public health benefits, about 1,300 avoided deaths, over 38,000 avoided asthma attacks.
Ramos says greenhouse gas emissions continue to increase climate change, leading to warmer temperatures, bad ozone conditions, and dangerous pollutants from frequent wildfires. These air pollutants are dangerous for everyone, even healthy individuals.
It also increases our susceptibility to respiratory infections like pneumonia. All of this can result in increased likelihood for ER visits and hospitalizations.
Electric vehicles are one solution to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. However, making the switch to electric vehicles has been slow, due in part to the lack of charging infrastructure, vehicle price, and overestimates of maintenance cost. But electric vehicles can be cheaper to own compared to a gas vehicle.
Also, once it's up and running, you don't have oil changes, you don't replace the brakes and all of that. So there's kind of some additional costs there that are reduced that you may not see when there's that initial price tag.
And Cornell hopes that when people learn about the consequences of air pollution, they'll switch to an electric vehicle.
Where it's tough to have an image on TV of like someone being injured by or killed by air pollution, but that doesn't mean it's any less bad than some of these other tragedies.
The consequences are particularly high for communities of color and lower income, according to last year's State of the Air report. A person of color in the United States is up to 3 times more likely to breathe unhealthy air when compared to their white counterparts, and lower income families face the brunt of air pollution burdens because of their location.
A lot of these times, these families are living near highways, ports, warehouses, and other transportation hubs, and they do face a greater health risk.
The hope is that switching to electric vehicles will benefit all Arizonans.
I think we can build a charging infrastructure too, hopefully with that kind of environmental justice element, social justice, where we're actually making sure that all the chargers aren't just going to Scottsdale, and we're putting street parking in throughout the valley, and we're putting it in areas to make things more accessible.
The report outlines many recommendations, including state incentives to build charging stations, changing over public fleets to making it more electric vehicles, and also establishing state standards to reach 100% of sales in electric vehicles. In Phoenix, Autria Maneshny, Cronkite News.
What does the fox say? That was the question a lot of people were asking this week on Capitol Hill. And Alexia Stanbridge has some answers from our Washington bureau.
There are a lot of things to be scared of in Washington, but wild animals have not been on the list until now.
I think it was kind of weird because foxes live in forests, but there isn't really a forest in DC.
There may not be a forest, but there's definitely been a fox trotting around the Capitol. Sightings were posted on social media for several days, and while DC can be a tough town for anyone, the tourists I spoke with said it's got to be really tough for a fox.
A rough place for wildlife, this nation's capital.
There have been fox sightings all over Capitol grounds. Capitol Police say they have confirmed at least 6 cases of people being nipped or bitten this week.
Most of the people I talked to made light of the situation, like Christina Nobach, who uttered the question that everybody wanted to ask.
I would have to ask it, what does the fox say?
But not everybody was comfortable with the thought of coming face to muzzle with a fox in Washington.
Of course I'd be nervous, and I would try to stay calm, even though I was nervous, and walk slowly in the other direction.
And I would just run away from the fox and tell someone and they could go get the fox.
Arizona Representative Greg Stanton said he sent a get well soon note to California Congressman Ami Bera, who was nipped late Monday. Bera tweeted Wednesday that he's okay and holds no grudge against the fox, which he hoped would be safely relocated. Even though it was biting people, the fox still had its fans. When someone created a Capitol Fox Twitter account, it got more than 4,000 followers in a day.
I just hope the fox is okay. That's the main thing.
DC Animal Control caught one fox Tuesday, but police acknowledged there could be others. Bringing you the Fox News for Cronkite News, I'm Alexia Stambridge in Washington, D.C.
The story does not have a happy ending for the fox, unfortunately. DC officials say that it was euthanized and tested positive for rabies. They now say there were at least 9 bites and urging people who may have been exposed to the fox to contact them.
Eagles represent freedom, peace, and strength for many, but a recent study found that more and more eagles are suffering from chronic lead poisoning. Cronkite News reporter Peyton Major scavenged to find out what Arizona is doing to protect these birds.
Eagles are scavengers, and they often feed on animal carcasses littered with lead bullet fragments left by hunters. But Arizona is trying to get hunters to leave the lead behind. An eagle's unique call can be urgent, especially when they're hungry. But there's also an urgency from research biologists about the use of lead ammunition while hunting. A new study published in the journal Science looks at the impacts of lead ingestion in eagles around the country.
Primary findings of our study are that almost 50% of bald and golden eagles showed signs of repeated lead exposure throughout their lives.
The study also found that the bald eagle population is decreasing by 4% annually, while golden eagles are decreasing 1%. Slaby says the signs for a lead-poisoned eagle are a grounded bird with a droopy head and a green tail.
Eagles are important to people. We have them as our national symbol, right? These are species that humans are attracted to, that we empathize with, and we see ourselves in them.
And in Arizona, of the few bald eagles studied, all were chronically lead poisoned. Liberty Wildlife rescues birds around Arizona and treats up to 20 lead-poisoned eagles a year. It can take 6 months to fully remove lead from a bird's system. California condors and other scavengers are also impacted by lead ammunition. Liberty Wildlife wants hunters to take action.
And when a lead fragment hits something, like when it hits a deer, it breaks apart in pieces.
The Arizona Game and Fish Department off Carefree Highway encourages use of non-lead ammo when hunting.
We've had 80 to 90% over the last decade of hunters in the area either switching to non-lead alternatives or removing their gut piles out of the environment after they're successful.
Arizona Game and Fish offers vouchers to big game hunters for free non-lead ammo when practicing in the California condor range. With the simple switch, more hunters and eagles are living lead-free. And with breeding season among us, eagle populations can continue to grow across Arizona.
The cherry trees in Washington, D.C. are reaching their peak bloom. Cronkite News reporter Alexia Stambridge takes us to the tidal basin to show us this much-anticipated annual event.
Like everything else, the annual tradition of strolling the tidal basin when Washington's famous cherry trees are in full bloom has been put on hold in recent years. Now visitors are back this week, making up for lost time.
We weren't able to go the last couple of years because of COVID, but we're happy to be back here. It's a beautiful day.
For years before the pandemic, Sarah Stein and her daughter Leah visited the cherry blossoms annually, and they were eager to get out and see them again this year before they moved to Arizona this summer.
I haven't come here in so long that I forgot what color they were.
In a typical year, the National Cherry Blossom Festival brings in over 1.5 million people to the tidal basin. People like Keisha Komschles, an Arizona native whose annual trip to see the blossoms was halted by the pandemic of the last 2 years.
But it's nice to be out with people and doing things out in the world again.
Guessing when the trees hit what the National Park Service calls peak bloom is as much a tradition as visiting the trees themselves. Peak bloom hit this week about a week earlier than expected, to the delight of visitors.
A lot of people try to time all their life, time that opportunity for that to visit the cherry blossoms, and they get here a little too early, too late, because they last a few days.
Jeffrey Post, an Arizona State University graduate, says the scene is like nowhere else in the world. The flowering trees were gifts from Japan to the people of the United States as a symbol of friendship in 1912. Now, 110 years later, visitors are still enjoying their beauty.
The place and the trees together is what does it. Again, you got the tidal basin, you got the memorials, you're here in Washington, D.C.
I talked with visitors from all around the country who turned out for this brief show. Peak bloom is this week, and petals are expected to start dropping soon. In Washington, Alexia Stambridge, Cronkite News.
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News Tonight. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.